It's been over 5 months since my last Valorant minifigure, which I'll admit is slightly suboptimal, but what can you do? For Brimstone anyway, I started with his accessories, which consisted of just these two pieces. I thought this video camera piece was perfect for the Odin he's carrying, even though the handle doesn't quite line up for him to properly grab it. I was pretty inspired by nostalgia here, thinking of that old Boba Fett using it as a blaster in the complete saga, and I figured the shape worked well to just have him lug it on his back. And this flat cap piece was the closest thing I could find to replicate his military beret, so I figured it would have to do. For his face print, I chose to use the concept art as a reference, which meant giving him thicker eyebrows, more defined cheekbones, and a more angular and I would almost say cartoonish beard. I also added some creases for his expression, widened his mouth, and pushed it right up against his mustache, which I think really captured his expression and character nicely. His torso print took about an hour and a half and didn't pose any major issues until it came to colouring in and representing that metal chest plate he has on. I needed to find some combination of dark bluish grey, light bluish grey, and white that properly conveys the shape of the plate through like the highlights, midtones, and shadows. I tried multiple combinations that included changing out the thick black sections, larger plate areas, and even the outline colour. A problem I found with it is that when I would colour the bottom area entirely dark bluish grey, as it was in the reference, I didn't think there was enough light bluish grey to convey that it was made of metal. I also initially liked the coloured outline because it separated the plate from the black sections and it made it look like its own object, but I didn't think it looked right compared to the other figures, so I eventually decided to use this one in the end, which I think balanced the pros and cons the best. For his waist print, I decided to print on the pouches on each side of his waist, even though the one on the right was completely cut off and never continued on his leg print. I figured this was a better option than either excluding it altogether or printing them down on the sides of the legs where they just wouldn't be visible on the posed figure. I coloured in the belt a dark grey as opposed to a dark bluish grey because I used the older grey on the pouch on his chest and I wanted to add some of that elsewhere just for the sake of balance. His arm print was next, and here ideally it would have been like triple molded to get his exposed skin in there, but the black section around his forearm and the sand blue of his sleeve I thought were more important, so I decided to just print the skin tone onto it with a black outline. I used his in-game model as a reference here, which in hindsight was a bit of a mistake because of this like wing-shaped symbol he has on his shoulder pad, which I needed to introduce this tan colour to out of nowhere just to be accurate. If I looked at the concept art first, I would have seen that I could have just used white here instead and replicated that symbol from his torso print, but oh well, I don't think that detail is even visible in the end anyway. His leg print was standard procedure until it came to colouring it in. If you look at his in-game reference here, you'll see that his pants have this like slightly green, slightly teal, slightly grey camouflage colour to them that I just could not find a good substitute for within my LEGO colour palette. If I made them sand blue, for example, which is probably the closest colour there, then it'd be the same colour as his t-shirt, which would have then had to be made a darker blue, and the end result of that would have just been ugly. So what I decided to do was colour it in using a dark bluish grey, but with areas of the older dark grey mixed into it. These colours are close enough to each other that they kind of blend in together in a camo print, but they are still visually different enough that you can notice these triangular shapes throughout with a slightly greenish tint to them. Also, depending on the colour settings of your screen, you can kind of view his pants as just a grey colour, so I wasn't too worried about the loss of the tealish hue. It was at this point I realised I had forgotten about the earpiece he has, so I went in and added that to his face print before starting on the Photoshop adjustments. First order of business was adding that badge to his beret, so I went ahead and drew that by hand. I don't love how that turned out, like it's definitely my least favourite part of this figure. Maybe it could have done with a black outline, or like with Cypher, maybe it would have been better 3D modelled into the hat itself. But I thought what I did was good enough for now. I might change it later. I also decided to manually draw on a different shape for his beret just to get that a bit more accurate, because it was bothering me the way it was. And with that, there you go, the finished figure. Harder than I thought, honestly. Especially the pose, which was pretty weird to get looking right, as you can see from all these test renders from early in the process. Happy enough with it, all things considered. Hopefully the next one could be done a bit quicker though. And now let's spin to see who's next. They added a hairpiece to Mecha Bricks that I think would be perfect for Phoenix, so I'm kind of hoping to get him next, because I think he'll just turn out well. Let's see, sure. Raise, okay. Okay, yeah, works for me.